Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we are continuing our discussion of the Taittiriya Upanishad. So today I am going to discuss one very important topic in the text that is called Abhaya. Literally, it means the state of being established in fearlessness. Now, fear is not taken in the ordinary dictionary meaning here. We'll find out soon. We know that the text is divided into 3 chapters: Shikshavalli, Brahmanandavalli, and Bhriguvalli. So, in this particular section, we are going to discuss about the state of being established in a perpetual blissfulness. So the text is this: Om asadva idam agra asid tato vai sadajayata tadatmanam swayamakuruda tasmat sukrudamuchyada iti yadvai tat sukrudam raso vaisaha rasakhevayam labdhanandi bhavati kohyevanyatmaga pranyat Yadesha akasha anando nasyad Esha khevananda yadi Yada kevaisha edasmin adrishe Anatme anirukte Anilayane abhayam pradishtham vindate Adaso abhayam gato bhavati Yada kevaisha edasmin udaramantaram kurude Adhatasya bhayam bhavati Tatveva bhayam vidusho manvanasya tadapesha sloko bhavati. This is the text. This is the page. It is 7th Anuvaka, maybe 7th, the 7th lesson you find there. In the Brahmanandavalli you find that is chapter 2nd. Yeah. Page I don't have that particular book with me. Yeah, that may be. Yeah. 7th Anuvaka. You may. 135. Yeah, 7th lesson. So this is the important text. Now, the text begins with a discussion about creation as a whole, and it is a continuation of some observations made in some earlier lessons that we refer to. So, asadva idam agre asid, tato vai sadajayata. So, the literal meaning is this earth, before it came into existence, was a state of non-existence. This is the literal meaning. So, before this world came into existence, it was in a state of non-existence. So, asat means non-existence literally, but that's not the implication here. So, what it says is, before this empirical universe, this visible empirical universe, phenomenal world, came into existence, it was in a state which was devoid of names and forms. So the world that we live in, that we interact with, this phenomenal world, the mountains, valleys, the earth, the skies, stars, galaxies, all. These constitute the universe with names and forms. Now, before these names and forms emerged, it was not absolute non-existence. So it is relatively called asat, which literally means non-existence, in the sense that this visible empirical world of names and forms did not exist before it came into existence. It's an important principle related to the concept of creation in Vedanta. So in the beginning, everything was there, but these things were devoid of names and forms. It's called avyakrta state, or non-differentiated or undifferentiated state of the universe. Differentiation means manifesting or unfolding as these diverse phenomena, and diversity always implies difference or diversity in terms of names and forms. If you look at the world, if you can look at the world without names and forms, then it is not the world, it is Brahman. When you interpret Brahman in terms of names and forms, then it is the world. It's called relativity. So this is the text. So it slowly builds up this concept of Abhayam or Abhaya Pradishtha. Now, there's an important philosophical problem. That is why this text is introduced. In some of the commentaries, this text is used to refute the popular Buddhist doctrine of Shunyavada. Now, Shunyavada, I want to speak a few words on the subject. Shunyavada is one of the four schools of later Buddhism. Shunyavada, Vijnanavada, Sautrantika and Vaibhashika. Shunyavada and Vijnanavada belong to the Mahayana tradition, and Sautrantika and Vaibhashika belong to the Hinayana tradition. Shunyavada and Vijnanavada are idealistic schools. Sautrantika and Vaibhashika are realistic schools. Idealism implies that the empirical universe has no existence at all. Now, the great Buddhist philosopher Nagarjuna, in his text, fundamental text of Shunyavada called Mula Madhyama Shastram or Madhyamika Karika, he establishes his doctrine of Shunya. But Shunya is not actually defined or explained by Nagarjuna as absolute nothingness. It is explained in terms of non-definability or inexplicability of the absolute reality. So in that sense, it came to be translated into English as nothingness. The word shunyam itself doesn't imply absolute nothingness. Now this can be understood only when we keep in mind this Indian logical system. In Indian tradition, there are different schools of negation or non-existence. One is called atyanta abhava, something which has absolutely no existence at all. Even as an idea, there are quite a few things that cannot even be conceived of as an idea or as a concept. It's called atyanta abhava, absolute non-existence. Then there is called pragabhava. See, a pot did not exist before it was made or manufactured. So its state of non-existence before the pot was made is called pragabhava. Before it came into existence, it was abhava, non-existent. Pradhumsa bhava means if the wet pot is broken, then also it has no more existence. It is called after breaking, after its destruction, it no longer exists. The fourth one is anyonya bhava. For example, when you say this chair is not the table, so you are denying the existence of the table on this because this is and that table is not the chair. The chair is not the table. So anyonya bhava. So these are four schools of abhava in mostly Indian logical system in what called Nyaya school, one of the theistic schools of Indian philosophy. Now, the Indian materialists they used to argue that everything is just an accident. It has no intelligence behind it. More like many modern agnostic scientists who mostly spend their time quarreling with religion, So they say that there is no design, no divine plan behind. Mostly they refute the Abrahamic concepts of creator God. The God one day created this world. That is totally against logic, what they say. So here, in this, when this particular text is taken, Indian philosophers like Shankaracharya try to drive home the idea that the word asat, which you read in the translation, which means literally means non-existent, but what is not existing, doesn't really mean absolute non-existence. It only means non-existence in terms of names and forms. So, and out of that state of undifferentiated condition, or called avyakrta state, this differentiated universe came into existence. This diversity of creation. So that's why Shankaracharya says, asat iti vyakrta nama rupa vishesha viparita rupam avyakritam brahma uchyate na punaha atyantameva asat. That is a, so actually the marvelous thing to remember is these ideas would have been interpreted as a kind of iconoclastic, nihilistic system if Shankaracharya had not touched these mantras with this masterly hand. So he says the word asat, that is the non-existent, in this mantra, asat iti vyakrta nama rupa vishesha viparita rupam avyakritam brahma. It is not this differentiated, this visible world of plurality and diversity. It was in a state of non-differentiation. Let's say, suppose you are looking at you're standing on in the eastern bank of the river, and there is another man, or there be other buildings and trucks and cars and mountains on the other bank of the river. If there is a strong cloud or fog in the morning, you would see only the whole thing as one entity, completely enveloped by snow or cloud. So you won't be able to tell a building from one building to another building. You won't be able to differentiate. You may see the whole thing as one subtle, ambiguous, invisible, vague entity. It is not differentiated. So as you approach the other bank of the river, slowly you will be able to tell the difference between one building and another building. You will be able to see the difference between the buildings and the mountains or hills behind. So differentiation in terms of name and form happens when it begins to manifest. So this creation is nothing but Brahman in his differentiated avyakrta state. But in his avyakrta state, it was in subtle form. So this is an important principle that is mentioned here. It's of great interest in philosophy. Now, raso vaisaha, rasam khevayam labdhanandi bhavati. So all these things existed in the form of rasa. Rasa means Ananda. Now, Esha Hevananda Yadi Yadahi Vaisha Edasmin Adrishe Anatme Anirukte Anilayene Abhayam Pradishtam Vindade Adasaha Abhayam Gato Bhavadi. So, how do we live in a state of perpetual blissfulness, free from all kinds of anxiety, all kinds of fear? So, Vedanta says, the reason or the cause for fear or anxiety or any kind of friction in life is the feeling that others are different from us. So the feeling of difference or differentiation is at the very root of every kind of problem we face in our life. And when we do not have this feeling of differences, then it is only Ananda. It is a feeling of bliss. So in spiritual life, what really happens is, either you are a devotee of God or you are a philosopher following Advaita or you are doing karma yoga. What really happens is, there is a gradual evolution, a journey from many to one, from diversity to unity, from the idea that everything and everyone is different from everything and everyone else. From that idea, there is a gradual evolution towards the realization that spiritually, the whole creation, the whole humanity is one. When this happens, what happens, then we feel a kind of inner bliss, inner happiness. So, one important characteristic of this inner happiness is we'll be totally free from fear. So fear should not be taken in the ordinary dictionary meaning. Fear is any kind of friction is fear. Actually, when we fall sick, we have to take medicine. But when we become too anxious, too worried, it is actually the fear of ill health and eventually the fear of death. So, when we interpret or define ourselves at the physical body, then the slightest problem at the physical level gives us bhayam or fear. Fear in its broadest sense means any kind of inner friction, anxiety, worry, or fatigue. All these are different kinds of fear. And as we evolve in spiritual life, one very interesting thing that happens is we slowly become liberated from this prison of fear, prison of friction. Not that we become reckless in a physical sense or we become negligent, but there is always an inherent feeling of Ananda. And the text tells you that without this Ananda, you won't be able to live in the world. Even life itself becomes impossible without this Ananda. That's what Vedanta says. So the text, the commentator tells us some very interesting things. Tadaha, so Shankaracharya explaining all this, he says, Tadaha yat yadi esha akase parame vyomni guhayam nihita anando nasyat na bhavet kohi eva loke anyat apanachestam kuryat ityarthaka ka pranyat prananam va kuryat tasmat asti tad brahma yadarthaha karyakarana prananadi chesta tad krida eva cha anando lokasya. So, without this inner freedom from fear, without experiencing some degree of inner bliss, can we live in this world? We cannot. Actually, every human endeavor, directly or indirectly, is a quest for this state of fearlessness. Our effort to make money is rooted in the fear of being poor. Our quest for extreme obsession, let us say, there are people who are obsessed with health, fear of unhealth. Extreme problem with regard to job, fear of a state of joblessness. So some kind of fear, and this fear is what takes away from us the inherent bliss. So Shankaracharya says, unless we have this Ananda, a state of inner bliss in, let's say, Parame Vyomni Guhaya. Guhaya means our inner recess of a heart. This Ananda bliss doesn't exist anywhere else. It exists in our the center of our being. So Hridaya Guhaya. Hridaya actually means the inner recess of our entity. So unless we have this condition of Abhayam, it's called, state of fearlessness, this state of Ananda in the inner chamber of our heart, we won't be able to live in the world. That every human endeavor, as I mentioned, every effort is directed towards acquiring this bliss. And another way of explaining this bliss is total freedom from bhayam. That is called abhayam. That's why this particular chapter is focused on abhaya pradishtha. How to get established in a state of total bliss or fearlessness. And without this, in fact, in our life, when we have some higher goal in life, which gives us a feeling of what I mentioned yesterday, kridakrityada and kridarthada, kind of inner serenity. When we do something, it gives us a deep sense of contentment, the feeling we have done what we ought to have done. When we finish a work, a kind of relief. Of course, this is only very vague, very ambiguous, very minor, very small, insignificant manifestation of that bliss, really. But a glimpse, a fraction of this bliss is the goal of every human endeavor. That's why Shankaracharya says, without this Ananda, there can be no life in this world. Now, how do we reach this state of Abhayam? That's why, Idakhe Vaisha Edasbin Adrishe Anatme Anirukte Anilayane Abhayam Pradishtham Vindade. So, this state is called, Adrishe. It is not physically visible. And then it is not something that is related to the body. So anatme, it is not related to the body, and it's what we call an anirayane, means it doesn't depend upon anything else for its existence. So abhayam pradishtham vindade. So when we reach this level of abhaya, then only we become fully established in our goal. Why? When we identify the presence of this Brahman, this Atman, this transcendental spiritual identity, which is ours, then only we actually get liberation from fear. Without this, every effort is only a quest for the state of fearlessness, but the absolute state of total freedom from fear doesn't occur unless we realize, well, I am actually a transcendental spiritual reality which is eternal, which is beyond body, which is not dependent upon something. Though it is not physically invisible, it is very intimately experienced. Well, I can give some examples, those of you who have read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. You find many interesting episodes in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Suddenly one man appeared one day. He looked a bit of an eccentric outwardly. And he just plunged into the Ganga, did not use a towel to remove his hair, and went to the temple and stood in front of the deity and chanted one hymn And Sri Ramakrishna's Gospel tells us that the whole temple shook and there was a spiritual vibration all around. And then after some time, a similar person, he appeared, maybe the same person, or he went to the place where the animals were eating food, the leftover. He shared their food and they did have no problem. And then he started going back. Then Sri Ramakrishna's nephew Hridaya was there. Hridaya was always with him. So Sri Ramakrishna told Hridaya, this man is a Paramahamsa. But the Paramahamsa is a state where a spiritually advanced person is fully established in this inner bliss. So he becomes totally free from all kind of conventions. He becomes totally free from all kinds of external etiquette. He becomes a part of the universe. He becomes part of nature. So when this man was walking away, Hridaya followed him. And he tried to dissuade him, but Hridaya followed. And then he looked back and said, Hridaya asked him to maybe wanted to know. Hridaya, then he told, when you stop seeing any difference between the holy Ganga water and the ditch water, not good water, not about taking bath or drinking, the ditch water, when you don't see any difference between the holy waters, the Ganga, and this ditch water, dirty water, when you see them as one, so the vision of or the experience of unity and oneness, then only you have reached the highest realization. Actually, Sri Ramakrishna was slightly perturbed and he prayed to Mother, don't put me in that state. Actually, he had gone through that kind of state at some point of his spiritual sadhana. But he cannot remain in that state. Such Paramahamsas cannot sit and teach a group of disciples because they are always living in a state of unity and oneness with the whole creation. So, great spiritual teachers like Shankaracharya or Sri Ramakrishna, all the greatest spiritual teachers, they experience this. But as yesterday you were reading, you were reading in Sri Ramakrishna's Gospel, they keep this vidya aham, and that is within their own control. They deliberately keep themselves in a lower state to be able to teach the world, to be able to teach others, to be able to impart this spiritual wisdom to others. So you find many such examples. Another Paramahamsa came, he had a mango plant in his hand and he went about dancing. He was looking at the sky, the river, and he was experiencing a kind of inner spiritual unity and oneness with the entire nature. So that is a sublime example of this experience of Ananda. That is a state of total fearlessness. Now, I don't mean to say that this is something we should aspire for. Every person living in modern 21st century try to become a Paramahamsa like him. It may not be possible. And also sometimes we feel, well, if these highest examples are presented before us, we may perhaps conclude, oh, it's too high and maybe not very practical. So let us move in some other direction. That possible misunderstanding is there. So what Vedanta tells us is, once we keep in our mind this transcendental possibility of going beyond all doubts and fears and anxieties and remaining or experiencing at least for some time, or if you are aware of the hypothetical possibility of this Ananda, that helps us in our practical life. And that helps us to look upon our own empirical life and all its challenges and problems from a more balanced state of mind. Now, how to reach that? that, as I mentioned yesterday, in Vedanta, there are these 7 disciplines to be followed. That is sadhana sadhushtaya and sravana, manana, nididhyasana. We already elaborately explained this yesterday. A state of, a discipline of differentiating the real from the unreal, then giving up the unreal, and then restraining the mind and the senses, and a strong sense of desire, a quest for the transcendental liberation, and then reading books or associating with people from whom we can get these spiritually helpful ideas, and then going deeper into those ideas by contemplation and internalization. These are the 7 disciplines that can give us an idea of how to experience a little bit of this fearlessness, or going beyond all friction. Shankaracharya, writing in a commentary in another book that is called Mandukya Karika. So where there is a text, a very interesting verse, he says, Susiddhanta vivasthasu duitino nischida dridham parasparam viruddhyante taihi ayamna viruddhyate. So that this verse tells us what happens to people who do not seek this unity behind diversity, who do not go in search of this inherent harmony and unity, and then instead of that, those who uphold diversity and differences. So, Sotsiddhanta Vyavasthasu Dvaitino Nischidadadam. The Dvaitins mean those who consider diversity as the ultimate principle. Those who believe in the eternal differences of people from others. Those who uphold the doctrine of differences instead of the doctrine of unity and oneness. They fight among themselves. That's the state. So, but the Advaitins, or those who seek this blissfulness by experiencing the absence of the otherness, the absence of the other. Those who experience the whole humanity is one family. Though in spite of this, we may have to encounter, practical life, people who are totally different from these views, who got the opposite view. So we have to be careful in our association dealings with them. But still, we will not hate them, because those who believe in the unity and oneness, they don't hate anyone, and they consider the whole humanity as one spiritual family. They cannot do harm to another person, because by doing harm to another person, they will be doing harm to themselves. So he says, Taihi anyona virodhipigi asmadiyoyam vaitigo dharma na viruddhade. Atma ananyatvad, Shankaracharya says in his commentary. Those who believe in absolute differences everywhere, those who do not accept the unity and oneness, they fight among themselves. But this Advaita doctrine, which upholds the principle of unity and oneness, has no quarrel with them. And then he says, you cannot hit your right hand with your left hand, so you will feel the pain. Like that, we cannot do harm to another person, because we also feel that pain. Then atha saha abhayam gato bhavati. So such great spiritual seekers, they get established in abhayam, this state of blissfulness, the state of unity and oneness. So this is the important text. The same Upanishad contains another text that is also very related to this. That may be, it is the 8th Anuvaga of the same Valli. 8th one. There you find, that is also very important. So, there is an omnipresent, all-pervading, spiritual reality. In that spiritual reality, the source of everything. So this particular text says, because of that reality which is presiding everywhere, one fundamental truth, supreme intelligence, behind and beyond the diverse phenomena, the whole world, universe is functioning. So it is Bhishmasmad Bhadav Pavade Bhishodi Surya Bhishasmad Agnischendrascha Mrityurdhavadi Panchama Iti Saisha Anandasya Mimamsa Bhavati. This is here. So because of this absolute reality Brahman, which is actually a state of Ananda, which as we mentioned, Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, it is Surupa Lakshana, the direct approximation or attempt to explain the absolute reality from its own perspective. That is, it is the absolute truth, the absolute consciousness, and the absolute bliss and absolute infinitude, Anantam. Because of this, the air, the wind flows, and the sun rises in the east, Bhisha Udedi Suryaha. The sun rises in the east, and then all these different phenomenal universe, all these aspects of the cosmos, they function because there is one unifying, harmonizing, divine reality behind all this. How this divine reality in its function as function regulating, harmonizing the whole existence, it is referred to in the term that we used yesterday, Rutam. So we already mentioned Rutam, Satyam, Dharma. We mentioned this. Rutam is the invisible, the harmonizing principle, signifying the interrelatedness or interconnectedness, the mutual coherence that we find in the universe. And also in our own life. You also find this even in seasons, in time. So in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Edasya Aksharasya Prashasane Gargi Surya Chandramaso Vidhau Drishtadaka, like that, Yajnavalkya, the great philosopher, is discussing with Gargi, and he says, if there is this diversity, the apparent diversity, you may call it even chaotic diversity, because so much of plurality and differences. Outwardly, we have to remember there is an inner and invisible unity and oneness behind all this. And that reality is in this particular Brihadaranyaka text is called Aksharam. Anyway, that's not what we are going to discuss now. So, the same text in the Taittiriya says, Bhisha bhayena asmad vadah pavate bhishodedi suryaha bhisha asmad agnischendrascha mrityurdhavadi panchama iti. And the death walks, goes about wandering in this universe, prompted or out of fear of this Brahman. That is literal meaning. What does it mean? Birth, life, and death and rebirth. And also the interrelatedness between action and its result and the consequence. You can see this happening in our own individual life. When a person does something wrong, he himself feels the consequence, or others face the consequence. If not now, another time, something comes back as an integral part of this, as an unavoidable response to this good action or bad action. So you can see a cause-effect link between action and its result. And in individual life you find this cause-effect link. So also in our life, birth, life, death and rebirth. So mrityu dhavati panchama iti. So even death is walking around. Because, can we ever think of life without death? It's a much greater tragedy. There are many interesting stories in the mythological Puranas. Lord of Death declared strike, and people started aging and aging. Finally, Vishnu and Shiva, they had to interfere to bring this man back to life, back to a duty, a sense of duty, responsibility, and then life started flowing as usual. There are quite a few interesting stories. Just try the idea. So, birth, life and death. The sunrise in the east and the sunset in the west. And the entire cosmos with all the chaotic differences apparently. But behind there is a unity, there is a harmony. All this show there is a supreme intelligence, a presiding officer, who is a sakshi, and who is not involved in this game, but who regulates it without being involved in it. So that's why it is called, frequently, the Atman, Brahman is sometimes called Taittiriya, or sometimes the Sakshi, the great witness. In some other Upanishadic texts, Sakshi is a person who is a witness. A witness cannot be part of what he is witnessing. And a witness should be aware of what he is witnessing, without being part of it. So it's called bodhrutvad audasinyitva sakshitvam. How do you call a man a sakshi or witness? The witness should have a sense of awareness as to what he is the witness of, but he should not be a part of what he is witnessing. So these two conditions. So this Brahman, this Atman, it is there in his presence, everything happens, everything moves. This is a supreme intelligence behind and beyond the whole creation. Now, this idea of creation is also sometimes discussed in the Taittiriya Upanishad. There is also something close to what you may call Genesis, but from a slightly different perspective. Now, the glory of the Upanishads is that it doesn't say the creation begins with an intelligent supreme person who decides frequently arbitrarily to create this world, and then he sets rules and regulations, do's and don'ts, and threatening those who don't follow the rules with hell, and then promising reward in the form of heaven to those who follow the rules and regulations. Now, the idea of creation in the Taittiriya is totally different. So, those of you who are you can see the sixth lesson. You can find the sixth one. I'm not going to the whole text because Taittiriya is a fairly long text, and the Shikshavali itself contains innumerable forms of spiritual practices called upasana, the Pankta upasana, like that, Omkara upasana, different upasanas are mentioned. And so I'm just selecting a few important lessons which can be of great interest and practical value to the beginner. So here you can bahusyam prajayeti satapo atapyada sadapastaptva idam sarvam asrajada yaditam kincha tatsrishtva tadeva anupravishat tadanupravisya satchatyecha bhavat. This is a text. So the text begins something like, and this Atman, this Brahman, bahusyam prajayaya iti, let me become many. Thus, the whole scheme of creation is explained in a metaphysical language. Then, So tapo atapyata. What is tapa? Tapa is not a conscious effort here. Yasya jnanamayam tapa. More or less, God did not want to create the world. Because if you say that God wanted to create the world, He wanted to do something. And if he wants to do something, then there is some imperfection in Him. And He wants to get which He already doesn't have. So that will make the Brahman imperfect. So it can be wrong interpretation. So it's a natural, spontaneous evolution took place by will. So and then Tat Srishtva, the world was created. Tat Srishtva Tadeva Anupravishat. So the Creator entered into what He created. So how can Creator enter into what He creates? Which it should show. And then not only that, Tasrishto Tadeva Anupravisya Satchatyacha Abhavat. The Creator, after having created the creation, entered what He created and became one with what He created, and the Creator and the creation are non-different and non-distinct. This is the idea behind. So according to Vedanta, God and His creation are not two separate entities. God and His creation are not two separate entities. Because if we are totally separate, the Creator cannot become one with the creation. That idea is put in subtle language by saying He created, then He became one with the creation. So that means the whole universe is omnipresent, the all-pervaded by one divine principle. Once we try to practice these 7 disciplines, you can actually feel that everything exists in God, what we call Brahman, and Brahman exists in everything in this world. So this is not only in Vedanta, even in the devotional philosophy, the highest reach of a bhakta, as a devotee of God, is the experience of the presence of God whom he worships everywhere, and the presence of everything in God. So in the Bhagavata Purana there is an interesting dialogue here. A king is a philosopher king, and 9 sages, there is a long dialogue. So in ancient times there was a great king, and 9 sages came to this king. So it is called the Nimi Navayogi Samvadaha. Nimi is the name of a great philosopher king. Navayogi means 9 sages. Kabir Haviri Andariksha Prabuddha Pipalayana Avihotrota Dumilas Chamasa Karabhajana. These are 9 sages. I mean, those names are not so very important. Kavihi, Harihi, Andariksha, Prabuddha, Pipalayana, Avihotra, Drumila, Chamasa, Karabhajana. So they were wandering about. You can find this in the devotional classics, in the Mahabharata and Ramayana and all the Puranas, and in the Upanishads and Vedas. You can find a very strange phenomenon. Great sages and great philosophers, they wander from place to place, visiting kings and emperors, sometimes talking to people, sometimes talking to birds, animals. It's a mythological story. But the practice of great sages visiting kings in their courts and holding philosophical discussion was an ancient practice. You can find this happening in the Chandogya, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad and elsewhere. So when these 9 sages came to the king's court, the king is asking a number of questions. Remember, this text is taken from, the text is an important text in devotional tradition. It's a bhakti text, Bhagavata Purana, but with strong Advaitic orientation. So a number of questions are put. How to worship God, how to take the holy name, how to practice self-restraint, and the problems of this Kali Yuga, the modern age, how to confront all these problems. There are many people who don't believe in the higher values, so how to live in these difficult times. All these questions are put in ancient times. Right? So one question is, who is the highest devotee? Whom do we call, in the broader sense, an ideal spiritual seeker? He may not have, either he may have reached the highest goal, or he may be a genuine beginner in spiritual pursuit. So the question is put, who is an ideal devotee? So one says, the third stage, Kavihi Hari Andariksha, the third in the list of the 9 sages, answers this question. So he gives the answer in 3 verses. In the first verse, he puts in straight-cut language, in blunt language. He tells, the highest devotee is not one who goes to a temple or a church or any place of worship. The highest devotee is one who has reached this level of, not an intellectual conviction also helpful, this level of experience. So, sarva bhudeshu ye pasyed bhagavad bhavam atmanaha bhudani bhagavadi atmani esha bhagavatottamaha. The definition, the description is bhagavatottamaha, bhagavatanam uttamaha, the highest, the noblest among the devotees of God. Who is he? The one who experiences the presence of the God whom you worship, whom you pray to in the temple. Not only in the temple, but also in all living beings. So you should, a person is devotee who feels, not just feeling, who experiences the presence of God in everything, in everyone, and the presence of everything and everyone in God. He is the highest devotee. So this is what happens to a person. He experiences this Ananda, the oneness. That's why in the earlier text we mentioned, you see, so edasmin adrishye anatme anirupte anilayene abhayam pradishtham vindade. This spiritual seeker, he goes beyond all differences, who realizes the presence of this transcendental spiritual truth, which is not dependent upon anything, and who feels everything in this transcendental spiritual truth, who feels the presence of the spiritual truth, the Brahman, in everything, and everything in Brahman. So this Advaitic experience of unity and oneness of existence is the very foundation of bliss in Vedanta philosophy and also in devotion. Even in Gita also, those who have read the Gita, 12th chapter Bhakti Yoga, it deals with the Bhakti. So from 8th verse to 11th verse, in 4 verses, there are many descriptions. It's a graphic presentation of 4 stages of spiritual life. The highest state of spiritual life is mentioned in the 8th verse. So Nyaya, so it says, Maya avesha manas samyak samadra vichara sugam. This is an instruction given by Lord Krishna to Uddhava in the Bhagavata Purana. You give up all your feeling of attachment and go in search of the supreme truth. Now, in the Gita, you find the highest state is explained. The one who lives in God and the one in whom God also lives. And if you don't reach that stage at the beginning itself, then you can practice other disciplines, Sravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, the Abhyasa Yoga, or you can practice Karma Yoga, and you can practice any kind of spiritual practice with a strong sense of unselfishness and a sense of dedication to the welfare, the whole humanity. That will take you to the highest spiritual experience. So you can find this ideal of unity and oneness in devotional philosophy and also in Vedanta as the source of this inherent Ananda, bliss, which is characterized with total absence of friction or fear. So that's called Abhaya in Taittiriya, which is called Abhaya. Being established in Abhaya means fearlessness. Fearlessness means any kind of friction, any anxiety, any worry, any feeling of incompleteness, imperfection, inherent incompleteness or imperfection. All these are different manifestations of fear. Fear in various forms actually dominate our life if we do not have a spiritual ideal to guide our activities. Some anxiety, some worry, some fatigue, concern for something, all due to this feeling of fear in various forms. So that's why the Upanishad tells we must have this higher spiritual ideal that itself can help us to begin this journey in quest of Abhayam or fearlessness. Now we have interaction. We'll continue the text next.
So, in order to get rid of our tendency for attraction, aversion, and fear, it is only the realization that there is something beyond, some unity that helps us strive to go beyond attraction, aversion, and fear.
True. And also when we remember that what we are concerned with is not eternal. You see, it is the fear of loss actually, very often. The fear of change, the fear of happening something to what we are doing or what we have. Fear of change. But once we remember, change is an integral, inherent part of everything in this empirical universe, then we may experience it, but it won't be a big shock to us.
Change is the source of.
Yeah, change is a natural, integral part of everything other than Brahman. Yeah. So actually when we feel that we have something or we are something that is by its very nature free from any kind of fear, any kind of imperfection or incompleteness, that itself gives us a feeling of bliss. That's called Ananda. And the text tells you, behind every action, there is, on the one hand, a fear of something, and also, on the other hand, a quest for fearlessness. A man working hard to make money, he is afraid of poverty, maybe. And he also wants to enjoy the state of freedom from poverty, really speaking. So that is also, in fact, the coming text will tell you, as I mentioned, I already referred to this yesterday, the state of a very young person, asisto, dhrishto, balishta, a healthy person with lot of money, lot of prithviyam, so much of money and wealth and physical and mental health, everything. So he has got a fraction of what we normally call happiness. It is a very vague, gross fraction of Ananda. And then those who go to higher planes after life, those who go, let's say, heaven, Gandharva, Yaksha, all these celestial beings, they have higher dimensions of the same Ananda. These are all we can think of. Now, there is a much superior, inconceivably much superior state of inner blissfulness. Actually, that's what we experience when we remember we are something other than beyond this body, mind, etc.
We are something changing.
Yeah, something that is unchanging. It's going to be there all the time. So, this is what happens to those who try to follow some higher ideal in life, because they try to orient all their actions towards realization of this higher ideal, which means they consider this ideal as something transcendental, everything else as part of the changing world. So a sense of higher ideal also gives us a fraction, a glimpse of this Ananda. This the Ananda, you can put it another language, is called Abhaya, means fearlessness. Fearlessness should be interpreted as a state of freedom from anxiety, concern, worry, any kind of any state of difficulty. All can be part of this state of Abhayam, called Abhaya Pradishta.
So without changelessness, there is
Yeah,
fear.
yeah. And beyond plurality.
Not plurality.
Yeah. Change implies duality, from this to something else. But once you remember the permanence and the unity and oneness of these, then we are not concerned about anything that is changing. I mentioned this yesterday. A person who has got a huge bank balance, he will not fight with another person in the street for a if he just loses a dollar bill, he will not lose sleep over that, because he knows he has something much more which is his. Like that, when we remember that there is something much more that is ours, that is unchanging, that is this transcendental spiritual dimension, then that will give us freedom from the fear, freedom from anxiety and worry.
I mean, fear, I'm not saying you're not saying this, but that fear and friction have their role as well. I mean, that seems obvious.
Their law.
They are instigators, right? They're and we have a sense of this transcendent reality. We feel fear. We feel when there is friction, then they can act as instigators. Or
Even for good actions. So fear can sometimes prompt us to do good things,
or
positive
as
things.
a way to reflect on where we are relative to that destination.
Yeah. You see, you can extend this, for example, to Buddha's life. So Buddha became concerned and worried when he saw this dead body, the sick man, old man. So he became concerned about these possibilities to human life, and he wanted to find a higher solution to all this. So he left. But the point is, in that kind of spiritual quest, there is also an element of joy. So it is said that even if you worry about a higher ideal, which not really concerned with something our own material, small sensory things, when we worry about, people who worry about global warming, and they do a lot of charitable work. People who worry about the problem of some problems facing this modern world due to heavy industrialization or emission of all the fumes, which upsets the global climate. They do a lot of work out of the concern for global protection. Okay, so you basically it's a fear, but they don't feel that kind of misery and the feeling of wretchedness which a person, poor man, without money, or even he may be very rich man, so after greed he may be working for more money. There is also a concern, there is also an effort. That's a very wretched and very undesirable state of mind, where you are struggling hard to fulfill a material desire. That's totally different from a person working hard to find a solution to global warming. So that kind of, see, Buddha was not feeling wretched, though he had this divine discontent, but he was not feeling miserable, actually. So even in spiritual life, when you work for a higher cause in life, there is some degree of an inner joy, this Ananda. That's what really happens to a spiritual seeker. He may face a lot of problems, but because of the fact that he's looking for something higher, there is inner joy behind. There is no misery or wretchedness. They belong to two different levels of fatigue and concern. Yeah, that's why in this Shankaracharya himself says, without this Ananda, you cannot really, without your eyes focused on some higher inner experience, maybe a very remote goal, you cannot do anything very important in life. That's the idea.
In terms of practice, how does one deal with the tension between wanting to transcend, to acquire this transcendent realization and
Transcend realization.
I mean, it's to
Yeah. Can you repeat?
not to want to be less motivated to deal with the mundane,
Yeah.
and to transcend that tension between that and also seeing the absolute which is manifested in everything we encounter.
Yeah. So we should do our duty. We already mentioned the Rutamcha, all these karma yoga, so dharma we discussed in earlier sessions. By doing all that, we can feel the presence of the transcendental. And yesterday I mentioned one very important thing. People who go on doing good deeds, go on speaking good words, go on thinking good thoughts, even without a metaphysical study of the higher spiritual philosophy, they'll be experiencing in reality something of this. That is an interesting aspect. I already mentioned this when we were discussing Swami Adbhutananda, a great monk in Ramakrishna, who was a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, who was not a conventional scholar, didn't study many of these texts, but he had that experience when somebody was reading these important philosophical books. He could relate it as part of his own experience. So, spiritual journey is not a journey from idea to idea. It is not journey from concept to concept. These are helpful, no doubt. Not all these concepts and ideas are helpful for us to turn our mind in that direction, because mind will be always thinking of something. So, by feeding our mind with these sublime thoughts, we are actually laying a strong foundation for spiritual life. But the real experience is beyond words and beyond intellectual conviction. That point is emphasized again and again in many of these texts. Yeah.
In this lesson 7,
Yeah.
it says asat.
Oh, I'm coming to that. That's what I think we discussed. Okay, you can. I shall discuss again. Yeah. Okay. 1 minute.
Asat. In the beginning, asat died.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But in the Chandogya Upanishad, how could it be asat? It must be sat.
Yeah. Chandogya Upanishad actually, a mantra begins as a refutation of some prevailing notions that asadvaidam agra asid means as a asadeva. So from asad everything came into existence. That kind of wrong notion was prevalent, and that mantra is a refutation of that. So that mantra. So
In the Chandogya Upanishad, he says asat does not mean nothing.
yeah, as a refutation of the prevalent notion that from asat interpreted wrongly as nothingness is the basis of everything that Bhashyagar, I mean the commentator, establishes. From asat, it is inconceivable that anything can come into existence. From nothingness, it is inconceivable that anything can come into existence. So wherever asat is mentioned, no sat. The sat here the manifested, unfold this the diverse, manifold, phenomenal world. That is sat. Its opposite is something beyond this manifold, phenomenal world, which means in its non-differentiated state, undifferentiated state. So when it was in a state of non-differentiation, when it was not differentiated or not manifold, then it was in a subtle state. From that subtle, it's called avyakrta or non-differentiated state. This differentiated universe came into existence as in terms of names and forms. So when you interpret this non-differentiated state in terms of names and forms, it becomes differentiated. So I gave this example some time back. Let us say when a person who is in a state of samadhi, state of Advaitic experience, you find in Sri Ramakrishna's life, when Tahoe gave him the mantra, immediately he immersed into samadhi, a state of Advaitic experience. At that time he could not drink water, he could not do anything, no function. Then he had to be brought down to a lower level to be able to function in this world. So in the avyakrta state, there is no function in terms of names and forms. So now the question arises from a purely hermeneutical point of view. Shankaracharya had to establish a positive interpretation of Advaita in this text. The text uses the word asat. Now remember, as a student of hermeneutics, I want to tell you, these Vedic texts, including Upanishad mantras, they were existing, they were transmitted through oral tradition in innumerable forest hermitages, innumerable traditions of different sages and saints. So they came to be taught. A positive, a harmonious, a sensible interpretation of these mantras happened with Shankaracharya. So his function was to give a logical interpretation without any friction. So he had to say, in this particular context, asat doesn't mean what it literally could mean. Literally it means atyanta abhava, something which is absolutely non-existent. So for example, sasavishana, the horn of a hare, it is actually inconceivable. If it is hare, it cannot have horns. If the creature has horns, it cannot be hare. So even as an intellectual idea, it is inconceivable. That's the real meaning of asat in many contexts. Okay, now here, asat doesn't mean that. Now, this interpretation came from Shankaracharya. Because if you interpret that name, the whole philosophy, the whole logic of these texts will fall to the ground. So he says, the asat here should not mean, it is unlikely to mean absolute nothingness. It is called atyanta abhava, absolute nothingness. It should mean nothing in terms of names and forms. So a state prior to the manifestation of the universe in terms of names and forms, nama, rupa, etc. So that's why he says in his commentary, the commentator says here, he gives a very logical conclusion. Asadva idam agre asit asadidi vyakrta nama rupa vishesha viparita rupam. Vyakrta nama rupa vishesha viparita rupa means nama rupa means this manifold visible universe, the Lake Tahoe or the city, trees and mountains, all these constitute the Vyakrta Nama Rupam, means differentiated, manifold universe of different names and forms. Now he says Vyakrta Nama Rupa Vishesha Viparita Rupam. Asat here means opposite. What is opposite? Before it became or before it was conceived to be this, consisting of names and forms, that is prior to its unfolding as in terms of names and forms, this asat. That's the meaning here. That is called avyakrta. So vyakrta nama rupa vishesha viparita rupam. See, vyakrta nama rupa vishesha means this universe which is differentiated in terms of nama and rupa, names and forms. Viparita means is opposite, means non-differentiated or undifferentiated in terms of names and forms. It is in Sanskrit called avyakrta. That should be the only logical implication of the word asat here. So he says asat iti. Asat cannot mean atyanta abhava or absolute non-existence as sasavishana. No. How can from zero everything can come? No, impossible. So that will give us, if you believe that for zero everything comes, then it becomes a kind of accidentalism, which was a school of philosophy in ancient India. You find ancient India had so many different schools of materialistic, nihilistic philosophers. Accidentalism, they believe that. Idrichavada. Idricha means act by accident. So he says there cannot be an accident like that. It's clear to you, Maharaj?
So in the Chandogya Upanishad, asat means what?
Yeah, in Chandogya Upanishad, that particular mantra begins, it is stated that from asat all these things come into existence. How can it be true? So the Upanishad refers to some views prevalent in those days, and it seeks to refute that view. How can it be? That is how the text continues. Yeah. Yeah. Clear, Maharaj? Okay. Chandogya, what absolute nonsense it is. That's the real implication. How can it be? How can from nothingness everything come into existence? It cannot be. Yeah. That is the implication in the Chandogya text. So, any question? We have. Yeah.
Maharaj, I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding this right. So, I feel that I do have this feeling of oneness with a lot of things. Like I feel a lot for animals and these people. That feeling gets a little difficult when there's somebody who's actually done something to hurt me in some way. And in that case, my takeaway from the last 2 days is that it's okay to make a show of, I'm not okay with being hurt or something. But it's for a household or somebody who's living in the materialistic world, you disassociate from somebody who's doing something evil in any way. And as long as you don't wish anything evil for them. Am I still in that feeling of oneness as long as I don't wish anything evil for them, but just say that I just don't want to associate with them? Or am I not able to see godliness in that person?
You see, is it ever possible for the world to be completely devoid of some activity of himsa, violence. See, suppose you ask every lion to become a vegetarian. Tiger should not be allowed, so he should have only vegetarian food.
True.
It's impossible. And if you insist that every elephant should become a non-vegetarian, so you find an inherent system in nature which is actually himsa, ahimsa, beyond himsa, ahimsa equation. It is not himsa to let a cat eat a mouse. You give the cat some good vegetarian sandwich, it won't eat, it will die. And if you insist that my cat should only eat a glass of milk, it will die. Then you will be responsible for the death of the cat. And that is also himsa. We are starving the cat to death. So can we really reverse an inherent metabolism existing in this world? We cannot. See, for example, there are certain religious groups, I don't want to mention by name, who practice some kind of ultra non-violence by keeping their face closed, because you should not keep bacteria and insects, But actually they'll be walking on the ground. Many insects and ants may be trampled.
They sweep the ground in front of them.
By sweeping also you will be doing harm to them. You may not sweep. You may pay a servant to sweep the ground of all insects. And do you think not a single insect will die if you use a vacuum cleaner or anything? So is it really no? This is not a way of advocating violence or himself, not at all. So you cannot really look at a man like Jesus Christ. His miraculous involving fish. Sri Ramakrishna gives the example of a loving mother serving her children with different dishes made of fish. So fish is killed. So it's terrible. Really, frequently, as we go further into this spiritual philosophy, you will get a very solid, balanced view of these things. Now, we should, those who follow their own discipline, they should stick to them, because if you violate your established way of doing things, then it may create a lot of inner friction, inner conflict. So we should avoid that. It's unnecessary. We should not upset our own or change our own pattern, but we should not insist that others should change their pattern or they should follow our pattern.
No, not that way,
Yeah.
Maharaj, but in terms of work, suppose somebody is trying to take the credit, they take the credit for the work that you did.
Yeah.
And at that time, maybe you have to stand.
Yeah, that you have to stand your ground. Certainly. You have to stand your ground.
But
You
then
can
that feeling of oneness with that person gets.
you read Bhagavad Gita. Lord Krishna told 18 chapters.
Okay.
And then he did not ask Arjuna to go to a hermitage. And Arjuna didn't go to a hermitage after listening to all 18 chapters. He went straight to the field of action. Suppose Arjuna was a businessman. Do you think he would have closed his shop? He would have become a much more efficient businessman. So, yatra yogeshwara krishno yatra patho dhanuddharaha tatta sri vijayo bhutihi. 3. Sri Vijaya Bhutihi. So, those who follow the teachings of Gita, you get a very balanced view. We are already live streaming, and also you get the Gita classes which I teach in the light of many commentaries like Shankara, Ramanuja, Manthu and others. So, you can find that Gita gives a much more focused and universal, broad-based view. It's difficult to have any confusion after reading Gita. Yeah. So, thank you.
Swami,
Yeah. Please continue.
If the world is spirit made manifest, Um, and we have this continuum of behaviors in the world, from love and compassion to incivility, exploitation, to mass atrocities.
Yeah.
I mean, what does it mean in terms of practice to spiritualize everything in the world? Is that a way of imposing philosophy and order to
Yeah.
the world as a way to practice?
Yeah. You know, there are 2 points. One, spirituality should enable us to focus on our own inner life, our own attitudes, our own behaviors, etc. That's one. And as for the world, it doesn't mean that we should have no concern for the world. But we cannot spend our time and energy worrying about the world, which has been going on like this for the last several millennia. And many people who are greater than us try to change it. It is not going to undergo radical change, but when we make a contribution for the good of the world, that helps us to change, to become more refined spiritually. The world may not change at all. See, one surprising, if you are a student of history, is today we may think, oh, Buddha was great, Christ was great, Shankaracharya was great, Sri Ramakrishna was great, wonderful, fine. You think their times were any different or any better than our times? No. Think of Jesus Christ. Roman Empire, Augustus Caesar, and he was crucified. Look at what happened. Then within a few years, Constantine used what Christ taught for any military victory. That is Constantine became the first emperor. No? So look at Buddha. Buddha's times also had its own turbulences. And every age you find has its own problems. So can we ever imagine a world minus any kind of problem? But it doesn't mean that we should become callous, indifferent or insensitive. In every age there were great thinkers, spiritual seekers who tried to be different, who were different, who also tried their best to contribute something positive to the world. That's also happened. So every age has this speciality. The good and bad, more or less, were of the same percentage, more or less, throughout history, human history, history of civilizations. So once you keep that in mind, then we try to discipline or practice in our life, and we do what we can for the world. Now, if the world can never be perfect, that's the very nature of the world. The world is not designed to be perfect. Otherwise, if you are a true Christian, for example, God need not have created the Pharisees and Sadducees who created his crucifixion. God need not have created the Pilate, the Roman governor in Judah or Palestine. God need not have put evil into the minds of those who crucified him. God should not have created man like Hitler or Genghis Khan. God could have created, if the whole world is full of only Jesus Christ or Buddha. If God was so intelligent, so efficient, so wonderful, why should there be so many inequalities? Why should there be, why everyone should be born with all the necessary equipments? It doesn't happen that way. So Vedanta is not looking for a God who should create an ideal world, which he never does. But Vedanta, on the other hand, is analyzing the world that we see around us and trying to find an explanation, and in the process how to evolve ourselves spiritually and doing our best to others, which is part of our own spiritual evolution. That's what Vedanta does. So every doubt about the possibility of the existence of evil in the world will take you to the concept of a creator God, and you won't feel any. You won't have one good word to say about a God who creates a world like this. Really. So That's the common ground of all agnostics, and you cannot dispute them. They do accept Buddhism, in fact. Buddhism is one of the very few religions, not Buddhism where you worship a number of deities like that, but Buddhism as taught by Buddha in the Pali canonical literature, is purely spiritual humanism. You know. That's what all these agnostics admire and accept. All other established religions, created religions, organized religions, they totally reject on this single ground. The only foundation of their argument is that why should God create a compassionate God, a kind-hearted, intelligent God, created such a cruel world? So there is really no foundation. Please be careful. There is really no foundation for a creator God as an ultimate concept in Vedanta at least. So we'll continue this discussion again. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.